Chairman Turner, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate having you from Munich. As you know, you created a bit of a firestorm in Washington this week when you sounded the alarm about the national security threat related to a Russian anti-satellite weapon. The New York Times is now reporting that the concern is whether Russia might put a real nuclear weapon in space. Based on the intelligence you have seen, how serious is the threat?
Well, the threat is very serious. Everyone who's looked at it uses the same language that I have, that it is a very serious threat. And I'm very glad that the administration is beginning to take action. We met with Jake Sullivan, and he began to lay out a plan that hopefully would begin to address this. I understand that Secretary Blinken here at Munich met with leaders from China and India, according to how the New York Times is reporting. That certainly would be an important big step to try to avert this.
President Biden has said this is not a nuclear threat, though. Do you agree with that assessment? How should people be viewing this?
Well, I can't confirm or deny this. What I have called for is for the administration to declassify this. My concern is that this is kind of like the Chinese spy balloon, and the administration is kind of hiding, perhaps some inaction. But as this becomes more and more public, and the administration grapples with what we're dealing with, I think they are going to be taking it seriously. I think they will be taking action, and that obviously is the goal.
Well, look, some of your colleagues expressed concerns that you were causing a panic with this warning. Others worried that you were jeopardizing intelligence. Was the way that you sounded this alarm about this threat responsible, Chairman Turner?
Yeah, so our rules under the committee, and really the purpose for our committee, is that when we receive intelligence that the House of Representatives should view, that we have the ability to share it. But the rules provide that we're supposed to first do this in consultation with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which we did, and including our statement, which we sent to the Office of Director of National Intelligence and received no objections whatsoever. Our committee voted 23-1 to vote this out of the committee and send it to the members of Congress, believing that they needed to know this information. And also, the statement that we issued to the members was signed both by me and my ranking member. So this was not just an action by myself, but I am glad, after meeting with Jake Sullivan, that the administration is taking this seriously, and we're now be able to see action from the administration.
Well, Jim Himes did come out, and he was concerned that it had caused a panic. He said this is not a cause for panic. And another one of your colleagues, Republican Congressman Andy Ogles, said your intent was, quote, not to ensure the safety of our homeland and the American people, but rather to ensure additional funding to Ukraine and to renew FISA, a key surveillance program. How do you respond to that allegation?
Well, Ukraine funding certainly is important, and FISA certainly is important. But this is about Russia and the administration taking action. Again, I think that if you read the New York Times article today, you can see that the administration is beginning to put in place an action plan. And that's what is important. We need to make certain that we avert what could be an international crisis. I was concerned that it appeared that the administration was sleepwalking into an international crisis. But it looks like now they're going to be able to take action.
All right, well, let's talk about Ukraine specifically. A key city has now fallen to Russian forces. President Zelensky, in his remarks there in Munich, called for more U.S. aid, calling it vital. But many House Republicans have argued the U.S. can't keep sending billions of dollars without a clear strategy. You've spoken to Zelensky. Is the Republican Party in danger of basically surrendering Ukraine to Vladimir Putin?
Well, the speaker has made a commitment to secure the funding for Ukraine. When we met with Zelensky today, we did meet in the backdrop of Ukraine troops having conceded land to Russia as a result of shortage of stockpiles of weapons. Zelensky described the math that he's facing of dwindling stockpiles at the same time Russia is turning to both Iran and North Korea for weapon systems. Zelensky, of course, did not blame his current situation or what occurred today on the delay that's occurring, although he did indicate that he's certainly worried that the delay could cause a gap in weapons getting to Ukraine. Those in attendance of the U.S. delegation certainly pledged their support. And I do think that there is an opportunity when we get back to Washington to move this important aid package forward because it is so critical. You know, Vladimir Putin is a murderous thug, and what he is doing and the atrocities and the war crimes in Ukraine need to be responded to. I was speaking to the mayor of Kyiv today, and he was saying this is the front line of the authoritarian regimes and democracy, and it is.
Well, as you know, President Zelensky has been asking for this aid since October for 5 months now. Has Speaker Johnson given you any assurances that he is going to bring Ukraine aid to the floor?
Well, President Johnson has made a number of public statements committing to finding a pathway for the aid for Ukraine. I believe him. I think that we will. And this does need to get done. This is absolutely critical for U.S. support for Ukraine and to oppose Russian aggression.
But as you know, a lot of Republicans oppose this, Chairman Turner. Do you believe Donald Trump's opposition to sending more funding to Ukraine is the reason why it doesn't have more support among Republicans?
Well, certainly people are very disappointed that the negotiations on the border deal in the Senate broke down and did not result in a plan. Now, the House of Representatives passed H.R. 2, which would have resulted in closing the border, the remain in Mexico policy of the prior administration, and would have allowed for moving forward with aid for Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel.
Chairman,
all
Republicans asked for the border deal. A lot of Republicans said that the Senate deal was the best deal that they'd seen in decades. But sticking on this question, do you place some of the responsibility on Donald Trump for the reason that more Republicans don't support sending more aid to Ukraine, which you have now just said is critical?
It is critical, and I think there's certainly a sufficient support in both the House of Representatives and the Senate in order to get that aid package done. I think members who are in opposition, have had their own path to get there, of their own concerns. But I do know that if you look at this issue of the effects of allowing Russia to continue in its aggression, the fact that it would jeopardize other areas of Europe, that this is very, very important for the United States to stand strong and stand with Ukraine.
Well, let's talk about Russian aggression. Former President Trump recently said he would encourage Russia to invade NATO countries who he says haven't paid their bills. You have endorsed him. Are you comfortable with him saying that, Chairman?
Well, this is what I know. When Donald Trump was president, he actually increased funding to NATO itself. He continues to push countries to fully fund, to meet the 2% commitment that each of them have. And I know that his work is important to get increased funding increased funding to NATO. You're already seeing NATO countries begin to spend more as a result of Donald Trump's words. I think that's kind of important. He's motivating them to do so, but I think he is very, very strong in his support for NATO.
But, Mr. Chairman, the words that he said this week, he said, I would encourage them, Russia, to do whatever the heck they wanted. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills. Are you comfortable with that?
This is what I know. Donald Trump's political rallies don't really translate into Donald Trump's actual policies. If you look at his policies, if you look at his record, he actually increased funding for NATO, increased the European Reassurance Initiative, and in fact, for Ukraine, he was the first president to give lethal weapons to Ukraine. So I think his record is strong, and I think that's what's important.
As we're having this interview, former President Trump has not yet spoken out on the death of Putin opposition leader Alexei Navalny. President Biden said Russia is responsible for his death. You met with Navalny's widow in Munich. What did she tell you, Mr. Chairman?
In a dramatic moment here, she took the stage at the Munich Security Conference just as the world was learning that Navalny had passed. She expressed her surprise and her really disbelief that her husband was dead. She later then met with the U.S. delegation. We prayed with her. We shared her sorrow. And certainly she points the finger directly at Vladimir Putin, who had previously poisoned Navalny with military nerve agent and then, of course, imprisoned him. And now Navalny is dead. This is certainly very troubling. It's part of the murderousness that we see both in Ukraine and here as the record of Vladimir Putin, and it certainly shows how dangerous he is.
Well, I guess the big question now is what happens next. President Biden has said he's considering his response. What do you think the consequences should be?
I think that as a result of Navalny's death, that we should even be that more strong in funding Ukraine and passing this in the House and the Senate and dedicated in Navalny's in his legacy, sending a message to Putin.
But should there be stronger consequences, sanctions, for example, anything beyond just passing Ukraine aid?
Well, I think certainly the first big step is Ukraine aid, and again, we should dedicate it in his honor. But at the same time, I know the administration is considering additional remedies, and we certainly look forward to what they're proposing and look at those as options.